Welcome back to another session of Just Me podcasts. And today we are joined by the amazing Victoria Hislop. So, Victoria, please tell us who you are and what is it that you do?
Sounds a very profound question. Who are you? Well, I'm Victoria Hislop. I'm 65 years old. I'm saying these things as they tumble out of my head, so it just shows how much I'm thinking about age at the moment. Um, I'm a writer and a novelist, by which I really mean I'm a storyteller. And the uh, theme and the subject matter of 9 out of my 10 novels to date is the 20th century history of Greece. So I'm in some ways very specialized, um, but in other ways, I hope my novels are about universal subjects. It just happens that Greece is my inspiration. And all my stories are about conflict, suffering, civil war. They're about, tough backgrounds, but the key theme of them is how people survive and essentially how women survive in a world where most decisions are taken by men on a political level that affects the social, um, right down through all the different layers. But they're optimistic books. I always have to have a happy ending, because I don't want to give people misery when they read. I want to give them a tale of the human spirit. And
Brilliant.
ultimately, I think we can be optimistic about that.
And how did you arrive at that? So, take us back to kind of childhood. How did the writer emerge from?
Um, I think the writer was emerging quite young. I haven't kept everything um, through my life in the way of, school textbooks and so on, but I still do have that very first. We had a sort of big, um, looked like a drawing book, and every Monday morning, our first exercise was what did we do at the weekend? And what was funny thinking about it is that you always drew a picture and then you did the text underneath.
Yeah.
I'm sure we can still do it in that format. And of course, I'd say fewer of us can draw than write. I think writing for me was the easy bit. The drawings are, humorous, whereas the writing was instantly the bit of the page that I wanted to put more into. So I always enjoyed writing. I've kept a diary since I was 11 years
Wow.
old. And for me, writing has always been a much easier way of expressing myself than actually speaking.
Wow.
You can reflect on it. You can essentially say something on paper, but you can, you know, make it better, make
Mm.
it shorter. Um, you can work on writing, whereas, speaking, I always felt a bit timid about. So that was, I think, the journey, began early. And then, of course, it's combined with reading. I've always read a lot. That's what we did in the 1960s when I was growing up. We did not have all the other media um, that sort of dominate, have
Mm.
taken over from books,
Mm.
essentially. Not least TV was just the first, but computers and social media and smartphones and all that, they literally didn't exist. They weren't
Mm.
even a dream of
Mm.
anybody's. Um, so in that sense, I think it was much easier to become a reader and a writer because there was less competition
Wow.
at the time. Mm.
Wow. And what have you learnt along the way?
Gosh, what I've learned along the way in general, and I see a lot of people who don't realize this, even among my own generation, maybe particularly in my own generation, is that learning is a lifelong process.
Brilliant.
It really, that's the joy of being alive, is that you not only in a formal way you can be learning something like I've learned a language in the last 10 years, um, but you can learn new things about the universe, about nature, um, about yourself,
Mm,
about
mm,
people, about how the world works. Learning is a continuous process.
brilliant.
And if you think it stops as soon as you leave school, I think, that's like cutting off a huge part of oneself. Because learning is what makes being alive exciting,
Mm,
I think. And it's great. I mean, on a structured level, adult education is a really valuable um, thing that many different places in the country offer. And I think apart from stimulating the brain,
mm.
it it sort of reinforces that message that you should never stop learning. Um, so yeah,
And
that's
and what and why did you learn Greek?
why did I learn Greek? Because I wanted to communicate with older people.
Mm,
In Greece, people obviously, when I began learning, it was 15 years ago, and at that time, 80-year-olds had all, certainly in Crete, many of them had never been taught to read. You know,
wow. Yeah.
education in the 1940s,
Yeah.
30s was very, very basic in a lot of places. And particularly for women, in fact, there's an elderly lady who I know quite well. She's 85 now, and she was the oldest of seven children. So she left school age 8 to
Wow.
look after the siblings
No way.
or to help. Yeah, it
Mm,
was very common in a village. And so she's never learned to read. And so obviously she's not going to have learned to speak English
mm,
either.
mm,
And I like to talk to old people because they're the ones with incredible histories.
mm.
They've been through so much. They've been through war and occupation, civil war, dictatorship, all these things. And I like to listen to what they have to tell me. So that was the incentive to learn, but it's been extremely satisfying to do it because now I
Is it?
can talk to anyone. I really don't need to wait for an old person. I can talk to, kids often, my friends' children. They're not yet at the stage of speaking English, so it's lovely to be able to communicate with young and old.
Yeah,
Um,
lovely.
mm.
So, who and what has helped you along the way?
I was thinking when you in the Who,
Mm,
it's really one person was the Who, and that's my mother.
mm,
She is the single, truly significant figure in my life.
mm,
Um, she, again, this is going to sound odd, but I think people who come from divorced backgrounds often have a completely different relationship with the parent that they live with.
mm,
In my case, it was my mum.
mm,
And I think there was no competition for her attention.
mm.
She was totally focused on me and my sister,
Wow.
and her love and support and the time she gave us and the relation, basically this relationship I had with her Um, she was really my best friend until she died aged 92.
Wow.
And I never didn't think of, oh, she's my friend, she's not my mum. She was my mum, but there was nothing unsaid
Mm.
between us. And yeah, when I think of what she must have been, the difficulties she was facing as we were growing up, which I was unaware of really. And yet she was this sort of funny, loving, witty,
Wow.
very unstuffy, never ever told me not to do something. There was never any don'ts in our house at all.
Wow.
Um, so yeah, no, in terms of who, I would say my mum.
Wow.
She was a great, great woman. Um, and what I think that the single what, although I've said that education is lifelong,
Mm.
should be if you want to have an exciting life. I think you have a very boring life if you don't think of what am I going to learn today.
Mm.
Um, the what for me was my schooling, which
Gosh.
happened to be just a wonderful experience for me. It was totally, state school, state primary,
Wow.
state secondary, and at the time, my county, which happened to be Kent, your local authority paid for your university, which seems amazing now. I mean,
Mm.
they gave me not just all my fees, but they gave me a grant because
Mm.
my parents couldn't fund it. They were means tested. So I was just given money to go to university. And it was, if I think now of kids leaving with
Mm.
these huge debts,
Mm.
I think I don't know where that money came from in the county. Age
Mm.
18, I didn't think about that, but I was very grateful. And it meant that everyone who went to university um, somehow they were the same. We
Yeah.
were all the same because either your mum and dad giving you this amount or your local borough giving
Mm.
you this amount. There was no sort of distinction.
Mm.
And so yeah, my formal education was, I'm very grateful to it, and I happen to love it. I loved it all
Did
every
you?
day, really every day.
How lovely. And was your mum an avid reader? Did she like reading?
She was latterly,
Mm.
yeah, she liked really hardcore crime.
Did she?
I like stuff with a sort of forensic
Yeah,
scientist
yeah, yeah.
and a lab with a cut up body, and whether it was TV um or books, that was her taste.
How
Very
lovely.
loved gore. It was extraordinary, and she wasn't really. You wouldn't have expected that if you met her. Um, but she was during my lot of my childhood and my teenage years. She was out to work,
Right.
um, and she worked as a waitress
Wow.
for many years. So
Wow.
she wasn't at home with her feet up, um, reading. She was
Wow.
serving people their dinner. And
Wow.
she used to go on her bike. She didn't drive, so she'd go on her bicycle
Did she?
down to the restaurant where she worked in a long dress. Everything about my mother, I think I thought was normal. I thought was cycle out in a long dress. We always had supper before she went, and then off she went to serve at the tables.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Mm.
And what obstacles have kind of hindered and helped you along the way?
Obstacles. I was trying to think of any. I think an obstacle is what you create yourself, isn't it? And
Mm, mm.
you need to just double. Um, yeah, I couldn't. Um, obstacles. I could say it was being a female, but I've never allowed
Yeah,
that to
okay.
be an
Yeah, yeah.
obstacle because I've never worked in a world where um like if I'd wanted to be a barrister, for
Mm,
example, I know that's a very male world, and or if you want to be a film director, there are certain
mm,
areas which are still dominated by men, but that was never an obstacle. In fact, I think sometimes it was an asset,
mm,
um, to be a woman in the PR and advertising world. The only thing I think of in terms of obstacles really was aging.
mm,
But even that, I think, just can make you more determined,
mm,
um, and more savvy about how you spend your time. Certainly, in terms of a writing career, um, it gives you a sort of maturity
mm,
I don't think you can have when you're 25.
mm,
So I don't think age is an obstacle. No, I think anything that's been a potentially, perceived as an obstacle in my past, I see it as an advantage.
yeah, yeah,
Like some people would think it was the best thing to have a private education, but I think I learnt a lot more by going to a school where there were, girls living in a caravan with their parents. And in the same class, you'd have a girl who had two ponies.
wow,
I mean, it was really, really diverse.
wow,
So going to that school was far more educational in a
mm.
way than going to, Rodine, which is a school I always thought must be like a paradise. Girls in Brighton and they wore fancy uniforms and all of that. But now I think no, I think that a good state school education is a step up in your life, not an obstacle.
And do you think that has come through in your books, the way that you write and, because they create a fairly level playing field in terms of life experiences and things?
Yeah, well, I think with Greece, because
Mm,
that's the society that I choose to write about,
mm,
there isn't the same hierarchy
mm,
of class.
mm,
They have a relatively small group of very, very rich people who live separately from everybody else, and then everybody else is more middle, just a sort of jumble of middle class with the same
mm, mm,
complaints. And
mm.
so I I think I've picked a society that is more how I think society should be.
That's lovely.
Isn't, they don't have this big distinction between private education and state education.
Yes.
Tiny percent of people go to private schools, but it's very, very, very few of them.
Mm, mm,
Not like it is here, there are a large number
mm.
of private schools.
And,
So,
and 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 how do you keep going when times get tough? What's your
uh, for
formula?
me, the default activity for any kind of mental, uh, upheaval or not writer's block exactly, but just when you're feeling a bit low, is physical exercise.
Brilliant.
It's um it's a surefire way to shift your mood, my mood anyway,
Mm,
because once you can get the endorphins pumping, I don't know why. There's a chemical
mm,
explanation for it, isn't there?
mm,
But that's definitely what to do. And it can take half an hour or go outside and go for a walk, but don't,
mm.
I think just sitting. I mean, that the problem is that when people are sad and depressed, there's a tendency to,
Yeah,
shut the curtains and go inside yourself, and it takes a huge amount just to leave the house if
brilliant.
you're in that kind of state. But if you
Mm,
can get yourself to the front door, get out that front door, and walk,
Mm,
that can shift things. And I know, and then, if you run, you feel even better if you can swim in the sea or do something like that. So I think some
mm,
kind of physical movement
mm,
kind of can stir some part of you that really affects how you're feeling. And actually,
mm,
music again, almost instant to have. It sounds so simplistic, isn't it? But to have a happy playlist,
mm,
which we most of
mm,
us have got access to if we've got a phone, create songs that, or not even necessarily with words,
mm,
I like
mm.
electronic music, upbeat electronic stuff.
Do you?
That really, yeah, and to move to that, to go for a fast walk or jogging if that's your thing with some pumping sounds. I defy anyone to come home feeling as unhappy as they did when they left.
Wow.
It just, music is an extraordinary mood changer.
Mm,
I mean, it works like drugs
yeah.
on the brain, but without doing the damage. You can really
Mm,
change mood so
mm,
profoundly. Whereas if you listen to some sad music, if you listen to the wrong music, you can find yourself at the edge of a cliff. You've got to be careful with music.
sure.
If there's something sad playing on the radio and you're thinking, oh, my life's really
Mm,
pointless, just turn that radio off immediately,
mm.
turn it over.
And why boxing?
Why boxing?
Because you
Um,
do box, don't you?
I do box. Yes,
Yeah.
I do box, and I feel so great after that. That's like about 20 fast walks
Is
playing
it?
electronic music in terms of speed of mood
Mm.
change. There's nothing better than feeling physically tired out. That is a nice feeling,
Yeah.
like you've given everything physically. And in the past, that's how people were in the day. A lot of
Mm,
what we were all doing was physical,
mm,
men and women.
mm.
Um, Nobody sat at a desk or was stationary for very much of the day. So boxing kind of ticks a lot of boxes, basically.
There we go.
Um, and I have a great boxing teacher. I mean, I don't suppose there are any very posh boxing trainers, and
Mm,
Connor is very much a down to earth boy, brought up on a council estate. He does a lot of teaching of teenage boys they're sort of one before they're disturbed
right.
thoughts. If they
Mm,
were 18, they might be inside. But
right.
he does lots. It's a charity. His name I can't remember, but he does it for free, and he does lots.
Wow.
So he takes these very difficult kids, um, and it gives them. I don't know. Again, they're letting out a lot of
Mm,
aggression
mm,
within the ring.
mm,
They're becoming physically stronger and more coordinated, and it's a pleasure
mm,
rather than, and they're not going to go out there and then hit someone because
mm,
they've learned to hit differently, but it
mm.
just sort of slightly trains and channels that
Brilliant.
um, aggression. So,
Brilliant.
I learned a lot from my boxing instructor about, kids' lives that are nothing like my kids' lives. He's part of it actually. Connor, he's very yeah, he's different. He's different.
How
And
lovely is that?
tells
Lovely.
me about some of these kids, without telling
Mm,
me their names or anything. And I think, wow, that's boxing. Boxing's good for everybody,
yeah.
old women and teenage boys.
Yeah. And what advice would you, if you could go back to the young Victoria, what advice would you give to yourself?
Definitely to have more confidence.
Wow.
Um, Girls for many, many hundreds of years were
Mm,
never taught that they were equal
mm,
to men. It just
mm,
wasn't, feminism was having got the vote, it
mm,
was that. it was like that was the be all and end all for many years, was, equal equality on that level. And I think because I didn't have brothers and I grew up in a house just with my mum, my sister, my grandma, two female cats,
Wow.
in an all girls school where all my
Wow.
teachers were women.
Well,
At the time when I went to Oxford, there were five colleges for women only.
wow.
And I think three or four what had been men's colleges took like 10 girls a year out of 200 intake. So most of us in the late 70s, we went to all women's colleges. And there was always that feeling, it was never spoken, but there was always that feeling that we weren't as good as the men. And I
Wow.
kind of bought that. I
Wow.
kind of accepted it. I thought, oh yeah, that's the world. And I didn't have the confidence that I've seen my daughter having.
Mm,
She's a match for anybody,
mm,
and fearless, and it doesn't even occur to her that she and the men in the room, because it's still the case. Any woman that you meet will say that men will talk over them.
mm,
It's just a thing. It's what men do,
mm,
most of them. I'm
mm,
sure lots of exceptions, but I
mm,
think women have got stronger. But I
mm,
was sort of before that really happened. I think I was quite intimidated by men because I hadn't had the practice of
mm, mm,
sparring with them, if you like.
mm, mm.
So yes, I'd say be more confident. Don't be the shy, retiring
Yeah.
wallflower.
Yeah. And would that be the same advice that you would give to others, younger
Yeah,
people?
I would really. I mean, I think boys do have a natural confidence. It's probably to do with chemicals in the body like
Mm,
testosterone. Again, lots
mm,
of things are explicable through science. But yes, young women, what you want to achieve, you can, because not many jobs, for example, are a question of how physically strong you are
mm,
anymore.
uh,
If you want to join the SAS or, the army, I think, that's still lots of physical stuff. And
mm,
women often find it challenging, but most jobs are to do with the brain or
mm,
dexterity rather than physical strength.
mm. And what legacy would you like to leave behind?
I suppose the obvious one, the thing that will still be here when I'm not, are my children, um,
No.
who I think are good citizens of the world. And I'm pretty sure that a couple of my books will still be being read. That is one thing about being a writer, is that you can still be earning money from beyond the grave, which is weird thought. There will still be royalties. So that's a nice thought. I think, yeah, it's funny. I think it is the real joy of having children is not that it is obviously the pleasure of bringing them up and interacting with them, but feeling that the next generation hopefully will be better than ours. I've
Mm,
no idea what they're going to face.
mm,
That always feels like a legacy.
yeah, lovely. And
Hmm.
then what's the magic that you think that Victoria brings to the world?
I'm generally positive. I
Okay.
think positivity, because when I meet negative people, I'm really challenged by
Mm,
them. And I just
mm,
think life is too short
yeah,
to be negative 24 hours a day.
yeah.
It doesn't help. Um, and there is that really famous book, I think it's called Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow.
Mm,
Probably read it. It was one of those big
mm,
sort of bestsellers in that genre. And they did this research about optimists
mm.
versus pessimists.
That's nice.
And though it was discovered that if you are an optimist, you're more likely to have a positive outcome
Yeah.
from what you're trying for. If you're a pessimist, you're already
Mm,
on the back foot.
mm,
So, I think my the pessimists, and I actually don't have that many among my acquaintances, probably because I've withdrawn from them a
Mm,
bit, because
mm,
quite often they're hard to convert. I think it is something some people are just born with.
mm,
Um, but you see things that they want to do, they never quite come off, or something goes wrong, or they lose all their money. And you think, well, if you've been positive,
mm.
so I think positivity, positive thinking, if you
Brilliant.
do exercises to make yourself think positively, be half full rather than half empty.
Brilliant.
I hope I'm that.
And what's your sort of fizzy pop moment? When do you really kind of go, wow, that's a really, I don't know whether you see something or write something or you do something or interact with somebody.
Mm.
What makes you really fizz and go, wow, I love that?
A sunny day,
Oh,
always. There's never any fizz for me on a grey, rainy day, I'm afraid. I'm quite weather dependent. And generally, it would be in Greece, throwing myself into the sea. I
wow.
mean, that gives me a very big high. That is the highest I can get in my endorphins and my pheromones and all the other nice things that we like to. Yeah, it doesn't tend to be, oh, wow, I've just read this great
Yeah,
poem.
yeah,
I'm not sure I've ever read a poem that makes me feel as high as being totally immersed in a very physical, in water. I think
yeah,
the sea is a big, it's where we came from. I
yeah,
think we are, aren't we? We
yeah,
once were fish. We became, we crawled out the sea, and
yeah.
then something else happened. And but I think the sea is where there's a lot of power.
Wonderful. And then if you could use one word to describe yourself, what would it be?
I think it would be optimistic.
Yeah,
Yeah,
brilliant.
which I know is repetition really from what I just said, but we've got to be optimistic.
Mm,
I've been,
mm,
everybody goes through periods of pessimism, but when
mm,
something good happens, you need to sort of recognize it.
mm,
So actually, things aren't so bad, or
mm.
things are going to get better. Um,
Lovely. And then what does the rest of 2025 look like for you? You go, how many times are you going to go back to Greece?
I'll be there, every month
Will you?
here. Yeah, I'm going in a week for a week, and then I have a week back here, and then I'm going again for some more research.
Oh, lovely.
And then by the time it gets to May, there'll be more continuous periods, and that's when I'll be fully writing this book that I've started.
Wow.
Need to be, I need to be there. I crave the blue sky and the
Yeah.
light. Yeah.
Oh, lovely. And are you allowed to say what the subject is of the book or?
It's about what happened to children and young people after the Greek Civil War.
Wow.
So, yes, I have to get into the kind of mentality of,
Mm,
in a way, children who are deprived of their childhoods,
wow.
because that's, what it's about, really. But it has a very happy ending.
Of course. Always full of optimism.
Yes.
Victoria, thank you.
Great
Seriously,
said,
thank you.
Sid.
Really
My
lovely.
pleasure.